Hello and welcome to TelecomTV. I'm Martin Warwick and I'm pleased to be talking with a very old friend who's spent a lot of time talking about NFV in the past year or two, Martin Taylor, the CTO of Metaswitch. Great to see you, Martin. I'd just like to ask you, we're here at the NFV World Congress in California, and something that I've noticed, you probably have as well, over the past few weeks, out of nowhere, pretty much like NFV appeared on the world stage from out of nowhere, SDN and NFA are now being mentioned in the same breath as being simultaneously vital to the new carrier ecosystem. My question to you is, under those circumstances, is one of these more equal than the other?
No, I mean, they are technologies that are kind of joined at the hip, and that was always identified. The original white paper on NFV that the operators published showed a really strong overlap between SDN and NFV and a lot of synergy between them. So, they're both about separating hardware and software, about, creating more openness, about making the network as a whole more programmable, both at the level of basic transport, which is really what SDN is more about, and at the level of the services that get deployed over that transport, which is more where NFV plays. So they're kind of really operating at slightly different layers in the stack, but they both need each other.
Okay, thank you. What does that mean? What does that mutual codependence mean in terms of development as far as carriers and operators are concerned?
Well, I think it means approaching orchestration with a view to ensuring orchestration kind of spans both SDN and NFV. So you need to program the cloud fabric to deploy your virtualized network functions. The SDN plays an important role there. But equally, services are comprised of some combination of network transport and application layer stuff that goes on, and that network transport may extend over the wide area. Typically it does, and so you need to think about orchestration way beyond the individual confines of a cloud instance, and think about the network as a whole, end to end kind of. So you need to take a kind of global view that stitches together the SDN pieces and the NFV pieces to create services as a whole.
One thing that we've both noticed, I'm absolutely sure, I know you have, is the speed at which this is happening. Because, last year, over the past 12 months ago, we've met and talked about this quite a few times, but are things happening much more quickly than even you envisaged they would?
We were always optimistic that things would move quickly. I mean, in the early days, I think there were a lot of naysayers saying, the big telcos are super tankers, this is a massive pivot, it's going to take them a decade to make this happen. And I think a lot of those commentators are eating their words now. I think there's a pretty universal feeling that at least some of the big telcos have moved extraordinarily quickly on this. And I think it's a reflection of just how important they see it in their future, and just how strong a kind of top-down strategic change of direction is being driven throughout their organizations. So we're seeing massive organizational change, but we're also seeing tremendous progress on actually standing up production grade NFV infrastructures. And we think that, we've done quite a bit of early kind of point deployments of virtualized network functions. I wouldn't describe that as sort of full-blown NFV. It's not the full vision of NFV, but it's certainly useful early steps, and there have been some good learnings from that. But now what we're seeing is the whole vision of NFV starting to be stood up and realized, and I think we're going to see real virtualized network functions being deployed in production by the end of this calendar year, with the perhaps not every aspect of orchestration taken care of, but a good proportion of it.
While this is happening and the speed at which the industry is changing and the virtualization is taking place, that's all very positive, but there must be pain points and problems appearing. What do you make of them? Do you agree there are some, and where are they?
Of course. I mean, we're talking complex technology here. We're talking about stuff that's pretty new. There are still things that we'd like OpenStack to do a little better than it does right now, but it goes on getting better from one release to the next. And I think there's beginning to be a consensus now that actually OpenStack has got to a point where it is actually deployable and stable enough and rich in feature and function enough to support the NFV vision, and it'll only go on getting better from here. So yeah, of course, there's going to be some teething troubles and so on. But I think the message we're hearing is that there's a willingness to push ahead on this journey and accept that there are going to be some elephant traps. And the key thing is to identify them early on and address them quickly, rather than trying to achieve perfection from day one.
I was talking to Margaret Kiosi from AT&T Labs. She's a distinguished network architect there yesterday, and she was saying that AT&T's intent and hope is to have between 70 and 75% of their network, massive network obviously, virtualized, NFVized within the next 5 years. Now that is a big ask of anybody, especially an operator as big as AT&T. But we're going to go through a period of a decade or so, I would have thought, when the physical network, as we know it now, and the emergent, transformed virtual network are going to be together. Is that potentially a problem? I can't see any way around it, but is that potentially a problem?
No, I mean, there are some good technologies that kind of bridge the gap here. So, if you've got a large install base of routers, they may not be routers from the kind of SDN, the white box generation, if you like. These are traditional devices. Yeah. However, they are exposing APIs and protocols like netconf that do allow them to be programmed in the spirit of SDN. So, services can be stitched together and auto-provisioned and created from a combination of legacy elements like those, install base of particularly of routers, and the new stuff that's coming along. So, I mean, there are no technical barriers really to this kind of hybrid coexistence. I mean, it's clearly a fundamental requirement for, NFV can't be a clean break with the past. It's got to coexist with what's out there. But again, the technologies, certainly in my mind, appear to be there to enable us to do that.
We've talked about openness before. It's something that keeps coming round and round and round again. And again, as you and I have talked about this previously, this concept of openness seems to be meaning different things to different people. Now, how many different types of openness are there?
Yeah, sure.
Now, what do you make of that? Because some people are talking about open source, some people are talking about open ecosystems and so on. Yeah. Where do you think things are going as far as NFV is concerned?
Well, my sense is that network operators are very keen to avoid any kind of vendor lock-in, particularly in the infrastructure. So, open source is playing a pretty strong role there. And of course, there's lots of open source building blocks that can be used to construct this NFV infrastructure. There's really no fundamental reason to embody a bunch of proprietary technology in the infrastructure. I think they accept that there's going to be a lot of proprietary software in the virtualized network functions, but that proprietary software will run over this open environment. And of course, they see much less risk in deploying a virtualized network function from a smaller vendor because it's just software, and the qualification process is much less, the capex risk is much less. It's much easier and quicker to experiment and prototype and try stuff out in a pure software environment. So I think that openness extends also to business and commercial relationships, and the willingness to work with a much broader range of vendors than they've done in the past.
The last question, Martin. Do you think the openness and the open source and all that going on, is it going to butt up hard against standards and standards bodies? Is it going to have any effect? Do you think it could be a break on anything? Or do you think that things are going sufficiently fast and are sufficiently settled for this to be not a problem?
Well, I know there's a debate going on between how much should we let standards bodies specify versus how much should we just allow to become a de facto standard. Exactly, yeah. To be honest, I think there's a recognition that things move much faster if you just allow de facto standards to emerge. And that it's not like there are lots of competing de facto standards. We're all agreed that we're talking about a small number of pieces of fundamental software in the mix here, like Linux, like OpenStack, like KVM, and obviously, they're not the only ones. But given that there's not a lot of obvious competition to that, and there are some sort of debates around the edges. For example, should you become overly dependent on x86 architecture versus should you abstract away the differences between x86 and other architectures like ARM, so that there's some portability. That's certainly an interesting debate. But I think that's a debate that's best played out in the market. rather than the heavy-handed deliberations, which inevitably are infected by politics that take place in the standards bodies.
Exactly. Well, no doubt we shall meet again in the not too distant future, Martin. We seem destined to do so. We can discuss this again. But until then, Martin Taylor, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.